Let's talk about how you lay KPIs out over your organization in a nice and complete way. Hello, I'm Tom. Welcome to my channel where we talk about continuous improvement in an industrial setting. And in this video, we'll go into KPIs and more specifically a KPI tree. So it's about how do you lay it out over your factory. Also, how will we then organize the follow-up, and a couple of pointers on how you can make sure that your KPIs cover the things that you want to check and that you don't lose anything in the process. And in fact, this video, it was triggered by one of my own videos that I haven't published and maybe I won't even publish, but I was discussing there a couple of things about problems and clownery with KPIs. And then I understood that I hadn't even truly laid out the groundwork for you to first talk about how do you set it up in a good way. So that's what this video is about. Now, when we are talking about KPIs, so key performance indicators, we often jump immediately to a KPI tree with different levels, but the basis is that you start with something that is important to the company. So you've got your company goals, and that is translated into what type of performance you need. Right? If the company wants to make money, then you've got how much is the material costing, how much can we sell our product for, how many products do we sell. Things like that become the performance indicators, and those that are really important to achieve your goals, they become the key performance indicators or KPIs. So there is our first hint. They have to be linked to company goals. And then what you do with KPIs and your whole performance management system is that you put those goals into your organization, into your company. And you break it down into smaller chunks. I was talking about, what's the selling price of the product and what is the material cost. Generally, those are more for marketing and sales, and that is more for the production organization or the logistics, supply chain type of organization. Those are in almost every company, different department, different units within the company. And that's where you see that first splitting of who is going to do which parts. And this will be sort of a common theme. And it runs through your whole KPI tree that you put a specific subset of a KPI, of a company KPI, with a group of people, a department, a line, a company unit. And like that, we split out that, and let's just take the money example because it's easy, but generally companies will put a number of KPIs in place, but we put in that cost of our product is one of the KPIs at a company level, and then that breaks down into how much labor goes into that, how much material cost goes into that. Things like that all together will form our main KPI of how much did it cost. But then when we are talking about the line that is producing the carton packaging for our product, they have very limited influence on all kinds of parts, different parts of the full process. They're not really affecting the raw material input. They are not really affecting how much is wasted somewhere. So that's why they give such a department a very narrow goal of how efficient are you with the carton packaging. And in fact, it can even be that you say on how much does the product cost. Let's focus on material cost. That further down in that tree, you see that your carton packaging line doesn't really influence, it's not significant enough that you give them a key performance indicator on this material loss. You may say that, well, that department really needs to focus on labor costs. It's a very labor-intensive process to put our products in carton boxes, wrap it nicely. And like this, you will see that at lower levels, you're going to miss pieces of the puzzle. And that is not per se a bad thing. As long as you are aware of it and you do it on purpose, it is actually very good to focus the improvement attention, the efforts, but also the direct performance management attention of those parts of your business on those things where they can make the best contribution. So maybe from the packaging department, you need people efficiency and speed. Maybe they're holding up most of the process. So if they can get those two things in order, very good for the overall company. But you should be able to work up how it in the end helps your company goals. So here we again have a couple of very nice points, but I'll put some on the board and then we'll discuss them. So the levels of KPI that you define, they sort of fit with your organizational picture. In fact, I would even say they need to fit your organizational picture. So your KPIs at level 0, and it's always easier to start from the bottom, and in a bit you'll know why. Those are basically your line KPIs. So the operator of a line checks this on an hourly basis, basically. Now you may say, for our lines we have what we check every hour and what we check every shift and what we check every day. Maybe, and there are good reasons to do this, but I would say not more than 2 meeting frequencies per 1 unit. But you also know that there is a level higher. Now if we take a relatively simple company with a number of factories, but they are medium-sized factories, so to say, you'll have some departments within the factories and then directly you go to lines. And this you do if your line reporting, done by operators, shift leaders mainly, really has the info you need on the running of this line, done on a shift lead level, right? Every hour, every shift. Then on a department level, this is a collection of lines, but there are several departments within the factory. And I don't mean that there is a quality department, engineering department, and a production department. It works best when there are even a couple of production type of departments, so a couple of line departments within your factory. Although those supporting departments, they also do need their own set of KPIs. That is also an important part. They need to contribute to the whole. But for the example, let's consider that we have a number of production departments. This factory might have 3 of them, and they all have their maybe shift, probably daily meeting of what is going on. Then at the factory level, you just want to know what the whole production site is doing. And this you do maybe daily, but more often in a weekly fashion. Depends a little bit, of course, on the size of your factory. And then your company goals, you're not going to manage that every day. Now, I know some companies that really like to do this in a weekly cadence, although monthly is much more common. Now, there is some spread in that, and that is not for nothing. There are actually also separate topics, but let's keep that to a separate video. Roughly, you increase the frequency by one of those logical things every layer that you go up. So this is hourly shift lead, this is shift lead daily, daily weekly, weekly monthly. If you have a more complex organization, so if you say, well, we've actually got areas within our departments in a pretty big factory location. In fact, our sites are so huge that we have a site that is basically 3 factories put together on one location. You add a layer. And then between departments and lines, in that example, you also add a layer, the area. Every time that you do this, so every time that you make this management layer, my direct advice is also give them their own KPI layer, so their own level of the KPI, with level 0 always being the line itself, that where the actual value is added, where the work is done. Then what you will also see in several companies I visited is that in the KPI tree, it might be alluring to put in extra levels, right? So in the KPI tree, we put in that area line. But the area doesn't have its own meeting, it doesn't really have its own manager. So what you then see happening is that your operators, and maybe your operator and your shift leader, are discussing almost the same thing twice. So they have their hourly line boards and they do things at the line level, and then once a day or at the end of every shift, more likely, they come together and they discuss what happened in this area. And every time that I've seen that, I've seen loads of double discussions. So my advice to you, link your KPI levels to your management levels. And that brings us into another thing, which is the meeting structure that you put in place to support this. It actually really looks like the same. So it sort of looks like also your management structure. And I didn't draw out all of the branches of lower KPIs. You can imagine that there are also KPIs above this factory, below this factory, KPIs below this department, things like that. But what you will see is that the meeting that you have with your company, it is led by the person in charge of the company. Right? So the CEO should also lead the performance meeting for the company. But in that meeting, you need to have a couple of people who are just there to support, but you also need to have all the responsible people from the factories whose results you are going to be discussing. So there's going to be two types of people added to this meeting. You've got your couple of support staff and, let's say, 3 factory managers. That is our company goals performance meeting. Now, these factory managers, they have their own performance meeting on the factory KPIs that they have with their team, which is them in the lead with maybe a couple of support staff and their department managers of the departments where you put your KPIs. And those department managers, they have, again, line managers, shift managers, team leaders. So the people who do the checking of the line. And like this, you create a system of linking pins between each layer of management. Now, if something happens that I was discussing, we add an extra level without it being a management level, almost always I see this also going wrong. For instance, 2 meetings, there is a daily meeting and a weekly meeting done by the same chairman, but with a different KPI level, different participants, but talking about performance. Not improvement, not goal setting, but again, about performance. Almost always, if that is linked in your KPI tree, it feels like an excessive meeting. I also see the other thing happening, that we try to squeeze the KPI tree, and at some point, well, our factory manager decided to also be the chairman of the production meetings because it is so vital. They're going to be there. Maybe not even as the official chairman, but if they are there every day, it'll be the chairman. And you put your production manager out of the real management picture and flatten this linking pin system, or actually go around it. Not a good way of working. So the basic advice, the number of levels, make it the same as the number of management layers that you have, with level 0 being the actual line, and then it's basically the operator telling your first line manager what is happening. So this can be a shift leader, a team leader, area manager, something like that. So who is the person going the round past all of the lines and checking how the whole team is doing? They are also the person who should be reporting in the level 1 meeting. And the second thing we really need to focus on when we're building out our KPI tree, but also the performance management meetings that we mix in with that, is that those KPIs, layer to layer, they don't always add up. In fact, they almost never fully add up. That is the whole idea. You are translating your goals and your performance expectations into more practical but also partial pieces. For instance, with this material, we're not getting anything from the packaging line. We are getting labor from the packaging line, and there might be another department where labor is not that important, but it's more the volume that they put out and the labor is fixed, so it has a link. Each of those departments has made their own calculations, or you probably did that for them, top down from the management side, on how they contribute to the overall company goal. If you haven't done that, and actually extra advice, do it. Make people understand how it contributes and why it's important. It really helps in the adoption. But that also means that when you check, let's say, a total labor cost for that department, then just adding up the results from the lines, it's not going to give you the same full scope. So putting KPIs into the organization does not mean that all of their information will automatically make the KPI go green. And that's why we need to check for each of the KPIs on each of the levels. That means that if you put the volume KPI into the lines, what you're going to get back is not the full picture. You need to track that KPI on the level where you put it. If a factory has a volume target, and they put that volume target into their production department, and they put a labor target into the packaging department, it still means that somehow things need to get together, and you probably don't have to test, if you still have the capacity and check how capacity is working on a weekly level. If you did a good analysis, and in that analysis you found that the packaging department, that is a really critical part. We really need to have the speed there. Then we have this pre-assembly that has plenty of time, really not important for throughput. The main production department that actually makes our product, that is going to be vital. They have plenty of resources, but the line capacity. Briefing here, that means that these two departments, they got a volume linked KPI, but from time to time, you're also going to have to check preparation, assembly, the stuff around it, to just see that you're not going to run into a wall at some later point, or that maybe slipping performance that was not key right now might get you into trouble at a later point. Now, because these are not that key, not that urgent, you also don't need to look at them in every meeting. And that is where we get into that idea of the second thing to do is that you have your direct performance tracking, you link it very directly, and you keep it at a frequency so that you can actually make the changes, right? So there we got that hour shift, day, week, month. This checking, do we still do all the right things? I would also strongly advise you to make that at every level, and yes, that does include the level 0, but make it at one interval, one frequency less frequent than your performance meeting. So this is your vision, your target setting, your improvement potential. This is a deeper dive into the performance of that area, that line, that factory. You take a bit more time to check for trends, to check for oddities, and to see if you are still doing the correct things. And that you can do on, say, weekly for a line, probably weekly to monthly for a department, monthly, quarterly for a factory, quarterly, yearly for your company goals. And you take some more data, but this also needs to be organized. And one of the main things that you check there is the KPI structure still logical? So those part KPIs that we put a level deeper into the organization, is it green on those KPIs, also giving us a green on our own department or factory level? And do we see trends that will influence what we're going to call key, or where we see improvement potential. Organize those things. Many companies that I see building up a KPI tree really think only about the direct performance tracking, which is your first priority. If you're setting up such a system, go for that first, but also know that basically every meeting sort of needs a shadow meeting that is a bit less frequent, but goes into what else can we do, what do we see broader in the organization, and that is the place for trend analysis. I would actually not advise using too many trends in your daily performance, but depends a bit on the organization. So for your KPI tree, you have a goal that you break up into manageable chunks for the organizational unit below, and then you break it down further for the next organizational unit, and that is why the levels of KPI should link to the organizational levels of management. The managers of those departments, factories, lines, they are the logical linking pins in your KPI meetings, in your performance management meetings. And you also need to make sure that you check at your own level that the results of the underlying KPIs in the end also really did give you your own full result. That will trigger some changing of how you run the business when needed, or it'll also illuminate some savings potential, some improvement potential. When you manage the performance of your company, you're going to split that up and make sure that the factories and the departments that build up your company, that they get their own specific targets, that is building out that KPI tree. They will do the same. They will give targets to their departments, their areas, and like this you get a KPI tree. That also means that you want to link the levels of KPIs that you have to your management layers and make the managers of those management layers the linking pins in your performance meetings, in your daily meetings, your KPI tracking system. Also, know that the KPI tree that you build, while it has to be linked, so a KPI down in the tree should be linked to the overall, one of the overall company goals, they will not fully make up the next level. So each level also needs their own full way of checking it. And basically on every level, check one logical frequency less than you do for the real daily performance. Now I hope that that will give you a bit more insight on how to build that KPI tree for your company, or how to work with it from any place within that organization. Do also let me know in the comments, what other parts of KPI management, performance meetings, these type of things would you like me to explain? So what are you struggling with or working on or thinking about? I love making videos based on your questions. And another request from my side, because I was looking around YouTube for good videos about KPIs and how to build a KPI tree. I didn't find a lot. So on any continuous improvement topic, if you find a nice video that you think I should watch, or also the viewers of my channel should watch, please mention me in the comment of that video. Let's get that sharing a bit better and make this network of good performance excellence and communication on our topics. It will really help me, you, and the rest of our community. Now, if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button, let me know. And for now, I wish you the best of luck in your performance management. And as always, don't forget to enjoy the continuous improvement journey.